Well, welcome everyone. This is the Melbourne Xamarin and Blazor meetup. So first of all, thank you to our sponsors, Melbourne App Development and Microsoft. My name's Rod Hempel, and shortly I'll be introducing two other hosts for the Melbourne Xamarin meetup. That's Lachlan and Kim. So a few announcements before we start. The Apple WWDC is coming up. So this is Apple's developer conference for those that are interested. So it's 22nd to the 26th of June. And it will be mainly, I presume, maybe online sessions. Kim, you could probably answer that. Is it all online these days?
It's totally online.
Cool.
So it's probably your only opportunity to ever get to go to WWDC because the tickets sell out fast.
Oh, right. Okay.
And it's always in San Francisco.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Okay.
Just being in San Francisco isn't usually enough.
And we're always on the lookout for presenters. So what we try and do is not what we try and do. We run a regular monthly presentation, and we keep it monthly just for the regularity, and everyone wants their fix, but we do struggle sometimes to get presenters. So if you're doing something quite cool, feel free to contact either myself, Lachlan, or Kim. Even if it's not a full session, we can buddy you up with someone else and do 2 micro sessions, which is actually what we're doing tonight with Kim and Lachlan. So, Kim is our first presenter. So, Kim Philpotts is Phil Pops.
Philly Pops.
Is a senior content developer for Microsoft, and he'll be talking about some new additions to Xamarin Forms, which Lachlan is also talking about cool new additions to Xamarin Forms. So they're splitting up and taking different focuses. So as you can see from Lachlan's photo, he's a sea shanty musician as well as a Xamarin enthusiast. So if you want to talk to him about sea shantyism, feel free. And without any further ado, let me hand over to Kim, who's going to talk first for half an hour, and then Lachlan. Over to you, Kim.
Fantastic. Thank you, Rod. Let me get some windows out of the way here so I can share my screen. There we are. I think that should probably do it. I think you're most likely seeing 5 new Xamarin Forms friends.
We sure are.
You sure are. Beautiful. So what I wanted to do was this is a pretty quick session. So Lachlan and I are going to be talking about sort of similar things. I want to introduce you to a few new controls that you're probably going to want to use in your Xamarin Forms project. So these are things that are available right now in the stable version of Xamarin Forms. Some of them are still marked as experimental, but they're all in the release version of Xamarin Forms. And so our 5 new friends that we want to talk about, and some of you may have seen some of these. We've got embedded custom fonts. So this is something that is really going to help you bring in custom fonts into your applications, because most production applications do use custom fonts, especially if you're working with a designer. The media element, which allows us to show audio and video. App theming. So this is something that, all the hipsters want to have both their dark and light versions. So we can now do that super simple. The swipe view, which is, as the name suggests, it allows us to swipe on controls, similar to what we used to have in the list view, I suppose. But this is much cooler because it not only works with the collection view, but it actually works with any control at all. So it's pretty cool. And also a really nice thing called the expander, which again, as the name suggests, allows you to expand content. So hide and show content. So they're the 5 things that we're going to talk about. I'm going to go through these fairly quickly. I've got the chat open, so if you want to ask any questions, feel free to throw them in the chat. I'll answer them as we go through. Otherwise, let me duck over to this screen here. So this is the application we're going to play with, right? And what I'm going to try and do is I'm going to try and implement all of those features into this application without restarting the app. So we'll give a hot reload a bit of a test here. So this is an application that I built for Microsoft Build for some live coding sessions there. And it's actually a very simple application. It's basically a list of activities inside of here. So it's got a collection view down the bottom. We can click on one of these and we can go into the details of a particular activity. So a pretty simple UI. It's, you know, it's got the ability to do searches. So if I search for bananas, I don't have any bananas as it turns out. But you know, that's the general idea, very simple application. So what I wanted to do is just go through implementing those features and give you just a bit of an introduction. And I should ask as well, of those features, are many people using these features? So feel free to shout out in the microphones if you want, or throw it in the chat window.
Done a little bit of dabbling with Media Element, and I'm excited by that because previously when I had to do things like that, it had been a pain. And Expand is the other one that I haven't used it yet, but I wrote that control myself so many times and was never very happy. So happy to have an official implementation, which I'm sure is better than anything I ever wrote.
Yeah,
and Media Elements I've used extensively. I know every damn bug there is in the damn thing, and I'm working with Microsoft to have them resolved. So if anyone's got any questions about Media Elements, hit me up.
Roger, man, I like it. I like it.
So why isn't Rod doing this presentation then?
I don't know. It's a good question. All right, let's duck over here. Let's implement it. Well, actually, some of this is already implemented because you might notice here that I actually do have custom fonts in here. I just want to quickly show you how to do that. So this is the project that we have. I can share this out in GitHub later on. So don't worry about sort of taking notes if you like. But the idea with embedded fonts is if you've done custom fonts in previous versions of Xamarin Forms, you might be familiar that you have to include them into like the iOS info P list and the Android assets, and you've got to find the font name, and it's different between Android and iOS. It's super painful. But one of the nice things that the Forms team's done has now allowed us to basically, in order to get custom fonts working, just go and get those fonts and put them into your head project. So in other words, your shared code. So you can see here, I've got a few fonts and Font Awesome sitting under a directory here. It doesn't have to be a specific directory. The only thing that you do have to do is when you've got a font, and it can be an OTF or a TTF file, is you've got to make sure that it's marked as an embedded resource, okay? And then what that's going to do is going to embed the font into your application. At build time, it's going to sort out all that info P list stuff for you, basically. Now, the other thing that you'll need to do in order to get this working, which is really quite simple, is there's some attributes. So you can see that there's 3 attributes I've got at the top here. So they're assembly level attributes. You can put them anywhere you want. I normally put mine in the app.xaml.cs. And all you do is you say, I've got an assembly attribute, export font, the name of the font. So that's the name of the font file. And if you want, you can optionally add an alias as well. I would recommend that you probably do, because the cool thing about that is when you're referencing the font, you don't have to reference like Font Awesome 5.3 regular 400 OTF. Instead, I can say FAS, which is short for Font Awesome Solid, basically. Okay, so you can basically call them whatever you want. And then within your applications, in order to use them, it's really, really straightforward. So if I look at my resource dictionary here, I can just say my font family is like bold font, right? Which if we go back and have a look at my CS, is this one here. And that's it. That's all you have to do. So that's pretty cool. I actually really like that capability because I put a lot of fonts into my applications, and that just saves a bunch of time. So that's our very first one. So that's our first friend. All right, let's move on to the second one because I've got to get through these in time for Lachlan to show you even more cool stuff. The next one we're going to talk about is the media element. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, up in the top here where I've got this red section at the top, I'm going to throw a video file inside of them. So the media element allows you to both play videos and audio. And it can actually do it from a bunch of different sources as well. You can either use like web URLs. You can have resources embedded into your application. You can get it off your local device, like libraries in there as well. You can also use it just for viewing videos or audio or listening, or you can have it display controls as well to pause and play and fast forward, etc. But it's actually really, really nice and easy to use. I don't think I've had some of the problems that Rod's mentioned. Mostly it's worked pretty well for me. But let's go ahead. Let's throw a video up the top here. So all we need to do in order to use this is, first of all, you're going to have a video file. So that could be based on a URL. If you want to distribute the video files with your application, they do have to go into the platform projects. So for Android, that location is something like under resources, and then you put a raw folder in, right? So I've actually got 2 videos inside of here. Okay, and in iOS, as is normally the case with iOS, you normally just jam it in your resources folder. And so you throw a couple of videos inside of them. So these are videos that have basically been embedded into my application. Now, if I want to go and use this, let's go to our main page here. Okay, so that's going to be my activities page. And I'll actually just get this up here. Let me see if I can just make this stay on top so we can see the changes. And, oh, that's not it. Hang on just one second. Where's my little stay on top window? Always on top. There we go. Beautiful. So then we can see it as it's happening. All right. So in this case here, right? So I've got this box view, which is red, which is what we're displaying here. If I want to go and use this media element, all I do, throw in media element. It's got things like aspect ratios. So that's pretty cool. You can say whether aspect fills or fits. So just like a normal image, I suppose. So I'm going to say like aspect fill. You've got some properties like whether it auto plays the video. So I'm going to say, yes, let's auto play that video. You've got other things like, is it a looping video? I'm going to say, yes, it's a looping video. You can also say whether I want to show the playback controls. In my case, I don't, because I just want to show that video in the background. So I'm going to say false there. Now, probably the hardest bit about all of this is actually providing the source, right? So if you're using a web URL, you can just throw that in like so. If you've got it embedded in an application, it's got a little bit of a weird syntax. So you use something called ms appx, and then you give it 3 slashes and then the name of the video, right? So I think this is called crafts.mp4, right? And then close that down, and all things going well. There we are. We've got a video playing up in the top here. So really, really nice and easy to use. There is one other caveat that I would mention here as well. This is technically an experimental feature, probably until they get all of Rod's bugs sorted out. So if you're going to use the media element, you might find that it will crash when it first starts. And the reason for that is you need to, in your app XAML, for some of these things that I'm going to show tonight, they're experimental features. And so you can basically say device.setFlags, and then you give the flags for the experimental feature. So in this case here, I've got media element. I've got these other ones in here as well. Okay, and that's basically it. You can throw videos into your applications and actually do a pretty good job. I've done some projects with, I had one which was like, a 40 meg file, and it just plays nice and smoothly. So, so there you go. That's the media element. I think it's a nice little addition into Xamarin Forms. All right, so that was our second one. What's our third one? I'm going to get through these super fast. App theme. So do pause me if you've got any questions. App theming. So app theming is something which was kind of, you could always do it, but it was always a little bit of a problem. Or you had to write some custom code for it. But all of the modern devices now support theming. So you know, if I've got my device here and I swipe down from the top here, yeah, let me swipe down from the top here. I can swap between like dark and light mode on my Android device. Okay. Now at the moment, that's not changing my application because I'm not using any of the app theming stuff. But one really nice thing that we can do is when you're declaring your resources inside of, say, your app XAML. So for example, here I've got, you know, some color resources, which are mapping to the background color of this and the background color of the cell and the page background and things like that. Instead of using a color, what we can do is we can use something called an app theme color. So in my case, what I'm going to do, right, is I'm just going to comment these out, right? And I've got some already because I didn't want to sort of invent colors on the way, but let me just uncomment this and then I'll show you. Okay, so basically what we do is instead of just specifying a color, you give it the same key as before, but you give it a dark version and a light version as well. So as soon as I do that and save this file, what we should find is that when I switch between dark and light mode on my device, it will hopefully theme my application. Okay, boom, done. So it's basically taken the correct colors. And so as you can see there, you don't have to write any code at all, which is really, really nice. Now, there are a couple of caveats to this, I suppose, in that if you are hoping to have your own custom themes inside of there, so you know you had a dark, a light, you know, a spring scene, a summer scene, you would have to still use a different mechanism to do that. And I've got some code to do that if you want to do it. But for applications that just want to support dark and light theme, this is actually a really, really nice way of going because you really don't have to change any of your code. The one thing that you do have to be aware of, I suppose, is that when you're referencing these colors, you'll probably want to do things like have, you probably see here, I've got like a dynamic resource. So a dynamic resource says, just watch for that color changing as it does when you change the themes and then apply the different color in there. So that's a really, really nice, simple way of theming your application. And there are some other things that you might want to do as well. Like you might want to do something like have different images for, you know, dark versus light theme, right? So this is cool for setting colors. But if I wanted to, for example, change this video, right? And I wanted to say, hey, this video, I want to show a different video depending on what theme I'm in, for example. What they've included is a really, really nice markup extension as well. So you can, you know, you do your squiggly brackets for a markup extension and you can say on app theme. And then you just say, okay, when I'm in light mode, okay, I want you to use this video. And when I'm in dark mode, what I want to do is use a different one. Okay, so let's say I've got that other video that I have inside of there, which is the AppX, and I think I called it dark header.mp4, something like that. All right. How's that look? Did I fix all of my?
You got some quotes there incorrect.
Yeah, I do have some quotes incorrect, don't I? There we are. That is not quite right, is it? What have I got on there? Ah, there. I don't want to get rid of that one. There we are. Okay, cool. So thanks, Rod. So that's basically saying, you know, when I'm in light mode, use this. When I'm in dark mode, use that. And you can do this for anything, right? I could say for an image, use a different source. I could say only loop the video when I'm in dark mode versus light mode. So it's just a markup extension to provide two different values for some attribute based on whether you're in light and dark. And so if this works, let's have a look, which it didn't.
It undid. You lost it.
I've lost it. So I can't type. That's my problem, I think. Let's have a look. So on-app theme of light is yada, yada, yada. Let me get this out of the way for a second. Dark is that one there. It feels right to me.
Try it again.
Let's have a look. Let me just check here. Let me just swap themes. All right, so I'm in light theme. I've got that video. Change to dark theme. Oh, okay. Didn't work. All right, let's have a look why. Darkheader.mp4. MS AppX looks right. Prize to the first person who finds a solution.
Do you need a comma after light before you do dark?
Yeah, actually, I think I do, because there's two values, isn't it? There we are. I think that's going to give it to me. There we are. Let's try that. Let's save that file. Ah, look, there we are. There's my dark, because I'm in dark mode. Beautiful.
What's my prize?
I'll talk to you about it afterwards.
Right.
So now, if I swap between light mode, okay, it's using that resource. If I go to dark mode, I'm now using that. So that's pretty cool, right? That's a pretty cool way of actually just bringing in different values for your light versus dark. Now there is some other things as well that you can do. Sometimes you need to know when you're changing theme for some reason or what your current theme is. So there's a bit of code you can use in here as well. So you can say OS app theme. So like my current theme equals like application dot current dot, and then we've got requested theme, right? So what that gives us is an enumeration, OS app theme, right? Which basically has dark, light, or unspecified. So it's going to tell you what mode you're in, which is cool. One thing you can't do is you can't force a theme change, but you can respond to it. So you can say, for example, application.current.requested theme changed, okay? And then you can, throw yourself in an event handler or something like that for it. And that will basically fire anytime you change your theme, which is pretty cool as well. There's another couple of limitations with this one as well. It only works with the newer devices because only the newer devices, or sorry, not the newer devices, the newer operating systems, because they're the only ones that support theming. Otherwise, you're going to get that, unknown theme inside of there, in which case you have to resort to a more traditional way of doing theming, which if you're interested in, I've built a theming engine in the past. So it's github.com philpott / I think it's called Theme Playground. Okay. So you can always sort of go here. So this is the way I used to do theming before we actually did it. I would have a theme helper and things like that. So if you want to check out an alternate way of doing it, but look, realistically, I think for a lot of my applications, just having the on-app theme inside of your AppX and then being able to swap these elements out of here is probably enough in order to get most applications, doing what you want. So that's pretty cool. All right. That was the introduction to app theming. I think probably most people should start using that. Let's have a look at the swipe view. So the idea with the swipe view, as you might guess, is that it's very useful for doing swipes. We've had sort of the idea of swiping in list views in the past, but it's always been a little bit average. So now what we have is we've got a swipe view that's available. So the swipe view can actually go around any type of control. So it doesn't have to be like a collection view element. So you can put around a grid. You can I'll show you a really cool implementation of it later on. You can use it for a lot of different reasons. But basically, if I come down here to where my collection view is displaying for these, we'll add a swipe into this. So basically, here's my data template. Let me move this a little bit out of the way here. So this is the data template here that is servicing this stuff over here. So I've got a grid here. So let's say I was to put in a swipe view here. Okay, so we can put a swipe view, and you just wrap it around whatever you want. In our case, I'm going to wrap it around this grid. Okay, so put it inside of there. So I don't know if that will do anything by itself. No, by itself, because what you do is inside of your swipe view, you then go ahead and you say, like, for example, swipe view dot, and then you can have these swipes on the left or the right or the top or the bottom. I haven't thought of a good reason to have them at the top and the bottom yet, but like, for example, if I said, okay, let's go and throw some right items in here. And inside of here, we can say, you can have one or many inside of it. So if I had many, I would say, okay, well, let's throw a swipe items collection in here, and then I'll throw in a swipe item. Okay, so this is going to be one of my swipe items. And from here, I can say, okay, well, let's give it a background color. I'm going to run out of space here. Okay, and I think I've got a theme already set up for that. Yep, a swipe color inside of there. What else can we have? We can have images, so like an icon image source. So I've got a star.png that I want to put in there. I can have an invoked message. So the ways that you handle this are either through events. If you are that way inclined, you can just hook up an event to this. You can also, if you want, use commands. But the thing you need to make sure that you do there is if you've got a command, you need to pass through the binding for this element. So a binding of dot in order to know which one you actually clicked on, essentially. And then we can put some text in here. So let's say favorite. Okay. And just with that, I think if we have a look here, there we are. We've now got a swipey here, right? So there's a couple of different ways this can work as well. So in my case, I've got this hooked up to a method, and all it does is it basically says, hey, this one's starred, this one's starred. Let me change it back to a light theme. All right. And just displaying little love hearts there. It's just basically binding to whether this is a favorite or not. So you may find, this is suitable, right? And you can certainly, add multiple swipe items here. So if I had a couple of swipe items I wanted to put in here, and so this one will say, I don't know, we'll give it a yellow background, for example. Okay, and put that in there. Then what it's going to give me is I've now got two things in there, right? So you can either kind of use what's built in. This is kind of how it looks. Or if you want, you can also create your own elements inside of those swipes. You can actually just use those like a content view essentially, and just put whatever you like inside of there. So as an example, and you can have them in different directions as well. So like if I wanted to, I could put this as a left item, right? And so now, once that's reloaded, oops, I have those in at the left there. Okay, so or you can have them at left and right. So as an example, if I wanted to, I could say, let's go and put in a swipe view dot left items, right? And again, I like to put in the swipe items collection. It's not always necessary, but it does give you something called a mode property. So there's two mode properties. There's one which is reveal, which is the default, which is what you saw, which is when you swipe, it shows you the menu items. And it also has another mode called execute. And what execute does is if you swipe all the way, it just performs the command. So it's useful when you have one element inside of them. So it just depends on what you're after. So that's something that's on the swipe items element. Now, if you want to create your own your own sort of looking cell inside of there. What you use is, instead of a swipe item like we have up here, you use a swipe item view. Yep, swipe item view. And again, it's got an invoked method in there, but all we need to do inside of there is just put whatever we like, right? So we could put a grid in here. I found that it's best to set like a width request, otherwise it generally sizes a little bit large for my liking. So if we had a grid in here, and then let's put an image inside of it. So an aspect fill, for example, let's what else we got? Let's put in horizontal options. We'll make it centered. We'll put it vertically centered as well. And then I've got, say, an image, right? So I've got the fonts.jpg because you should have a fonts in every one of your applications. So I think now what I should have is I've got those elements over there, and then I got the fonts over here, if you want to go and like give it a thumbs up. So it's actually very, very powerful.
Can we have a question here from Himmel about, can you see the question? Can you arrange items in different positions like in a grid? This is before you mentioned the grid.
Yeah, right. Yeah, so if like pretty much pretty much what it's going to do is it's just going to use its default styling. If you use, let me move this over here. If you use a swipe item like this, it's just going to do its thing. Basically gets a big old image and puts the text underneath it. If you want to custom control it, you want to put things in different positions, yeah, I'd suggest using a swipe item view, and then you can do whatever you want. You know, like if I wanted my fonts to be rotated, because that's what you do with the fonts, right? So now, once that reloads, okay, so now my fonts is rotated there as well. So there's actually some nice properties as well. So if you want to get super fancy with it, you can do things like you can detect how far it's swiping, which means that, you know, if I wanted to animate the fonts going from transparent to fully visible, I could do that. But yeah, I would say if your question, Himmel, is around, you know, can we put things in different positions and customize it? Yeah, just use a swipe item view. If you just want to reorder them, they basically just appear in the order that they are defined here in the XAML. So if I wanted this one to be first, it's now going to be in that order. Okay, and you know, it's pretty cool. Like if we put this in the top items, let's just see. Okay, so now I've got my swipe from the right, and I got the fonts going down. So you can do some pretty creative stuff with that. I've seen some people do some pretty cool things with it. And again, it's not tied to the collection view. It's actually just works around any control at all, which is really nice. Cool. All right, so that's pretty much the swipe view. Any other questions? No? No. All right, let's go to the expander. Here's a good bit of fun. So the expander, as the name would suggest, with the expander, it allows you to have a part of your UI which either can expand or contract, and you can allow the user to do that. So for example, if I go into one of these pages here, I've got this list of tips. So if I had, you know, if this is a great big list or I had multiple things, I might want to put this, for example, inside of an expansion block. So, you know, it might appear initially just with tips, and then I click on it and then these appear. So in order to do that with the expander, let me go and find that page. That's the activities detail page. All right, so how this is actually structured here is we've basically got the stack layout, a bindable repeater of stack layout with our activities in here. So that's what's this code here, this stack layout is what's giving us these elements, right? So if I wanted to say, make this the header, right? All I need to do is basically come up here. Okay, so this grid is that header which has the tips in it, and say, okay, I want to use an expander here. And then I'll put the expander around all of the content, including what is the child content, right? So that's basically down to there, okay? And then I specify something as the expander header. So I would say expander dot, come on, Visual Studio. Wow. You know how I said I would get all of this done without restarting? If it wasn't for Visual Studio, I would have done that.
I've had
Sometimes things don't
Visual
work.
Studio crash a few times on me today, in fact. It's just,
Yeah, I think the latest release is not the most stable.
mm.
All right, let me task manager that puppy out of here, and then I'll restart it. All right, and let's just pull it back up again. But the idea is with the expander, you just wrap the content in the expander tag, and it basically handles it for you, including all of the measuring as well. So here comes my Visual Studio. It's doing its best to load. I hit the recover selected files. That's always a dubious option. But
We're not seeing your Visual Studio yet.
no, it's busy loading on another screen. You know how I have lots of screens, Lachlan?
Ah, yeah.
All right, it's almost there. There we go. All right, let's have a look. Let's see what it did and didn't save out of this. Let's go back to this view, activities detail. And let's see whether it got any of that. No, it didn't. All right. That's all right. We can deal with this. All right. Don't like that this isn't showing my Android emulator at the moment. And my Visual Studio, look at my Visual Studio sitting there at a ridiculous percent. Let me just give it a moment. One thing I think I have a problem with on my machine is particularly editing XAML files has been problematic in Visual Studio recently.
Does the expander view only go vertical, or could you do like a horizontal expansion?
It doesn't have, it's a good question. I don't know, but it doesn't have an orientation property.
I don't know if it is a good question. I can't think of a reason why I would want to.
No. Let's have a look at what my Visual Studio is doing here.
Looks like it's crashing.
It does. It looks a lot like it's crashing.
Today it continued to crash on my Windows machine by just double clicking on, I did a show where reference and double clicking on them caused crashes.
Yeah, right.
Unbelievable.
Let me I'll just launch it one more time and see how we go.
Current VS Mac is excellent. I've currently got 4 instances of VS Mac open, 2 of them with 54 projects in them. It's behaving perfectly.
Yes, I must say, I do find the Mac version a bit more stable.
All right, let's see.
I wouldn't always say that.
Yeah.
Actually, I should say it the other way around. I found them both stable, except for this last few days on Windows.
All right, let's see how we go here. This looks a little bit more promising because it's picked up my emulator. Now, the other thing is I never reboot my machines. So you never know. Okay, let's try it again. Expander, right? So we have an expander. We wrap this around all of the content that we want to be in the expander, including the header, which is our grid there. So it wants to go around that stack layout there. Okay. And then what we do is we define something as the header, right? So the thing that the user clicks on. So you just say expander.header. Okay. And then in our case, we just want to wrap it around this bit here, which is the thing that has the label, which says tips in here, right? And so if I go ahead and save that, get this out of the way so you can see a bit more code. Maybe I should move this over here. Actually, it's not running. It's running the cached, more the already running version. So let's just deploy it.
Sometimes things don't work.
Glenn's here.
Glenn's here. Look at that. 0 errors. If at first you don't succeed, just hit the deploy button again. All right, I think this will probably work. All right, so now you can see it's not showing that content, right? Because it's in an expandable section. But if I click on it, it's now going to appear, right? So it basically handles that. It also does the animations for you as well. So it's got quite a bit of control that you can do over the animations. One of the things that it doesn't do that I think you probably need to do for any sort of expandable section like that is have like some kind of indicator potentially of what you're doing. The docs give a decent way of doing this. The way that they suggest doing it is essentially create yourself an element here, right? So I've got an image with an expand PNG, and then you have a data trigger, which basically says, have a look at the expander, and if it's expanded, then use the collapse button. Otherwise, use the expand button, right? So this is a data trigger. And what that's going to do, if I save that, is now I've got this little image here. Okay. And then when you expand, it shows that. When you collapse, it shows that. Now, personally, I like to animate things. So I would probably, what you can do is with the expander, you can have things like expanded, right? So you control whether it is expanded or not. So if I say true, that's its default state. They're all bindable properties. And then we've probably got expanding. So we've got things like animation links in there as well. You can also detect clicks on it and work out what's happening in there as well. And then I would basically go and get this image and then I would give it a little rotate. You know, that's how I would do it. But that's the expander. It's pretty nice. I saw a really, really good example that I wanted to show you using the expander. And actually, while we're here, let's just check for Lachlan. No, we don't have an orientation. Here's a really, really cool example of an expander. Okay, see this application here? So this is a collection view inside of here. And when we click on one of these, it expands out and it basically folds those elements down. That's a really nice little UI. So that UI, if you want to go and dig into that, that is by DevCrux, right? So all it is, and he does lovely work. Basically, you know, you can go and have a look at the code in there and how he's built it. But effectively, all it does inside of here, if we'll just have a look at the code for the main page. Okay, all it's doing is it's saying, hey, look, when I tap on this expander here, okay, go and find the child elements inside of here, and then say, look, if I'm expanding, right, go and open up those elements, and it just does a little animation where it just sort of adjusts the rotation of those and then makes them visible. So just some really simple Xamarin Forms animations. But it's a really, really nice effect. And I think that's a great way of using the expander inside of there. So, so that is, that's 5 of the new controls, which I think are probably good ones for you to use. So next up, Lachlan is going to talk about some even newer controls, so things that haven't actually been released yet. But before I hand over to Lachlan, let's just see any questions.
Actually, Kim, we might get people to hold on to the questions because I know that Lachlan's got some really cool stuff to come, and maybe we can take the questions afterwards, just because we're running in just a little bit late.
Yeah, no questions. There we are. Beautiful.
No. I've got a bunch of questions, but I'm stacking them up, and you can't get away with it. But let's open it up a bit later.
All right, fantastic. I'm going to stop sharing. Hand over to you, Lachlan. So it's the new stuff.
Thank you, Kim. That was awesome. And I need to put all of them in all my apps. Alrighty. Are you seeing one of my screens?
We are. We're seeing your slides, I think.
Cool. And when I drag in this simulator, do you see it?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
That makes me happy. Cool. So all the stuff Kim just looked at has come out either in forms 4.5 or 4.6, I think, pretty much. So that's all kind of in the past month or two. Stuff I'm going to be looking at is in 4.7, 4.8, and then a bit about what will be happening in 5.0. So 4.6, current stable. It's got all that cool new stuff in it. 4.7 is in preview at the moment, and I think it's going to be coming out probably in the next week or so. And it's got lots of cool stuff to do with 2D graphics. So these are the sort of things where up until now, you would have had to write it twice using the native stuff for iOS and Android. And those graphics APIs can be a pain and have confused me immensely at times. Or you could have done this stuff with Ski-Sharp, but that kind of means bringing in another NuGet, learning a new API. So Ski-Sharp is hugely powerful, can do all sorts of things. It's still got its place. This is just kind of going to be a light version of that, built right into forms. Then we're going to have 4.8 coming out in a couple of months. And then 5 is going to kind of mainly be pulling all the features that are currently got that experimental flag on them, making them stable. So that's the main goal for that. All the stuff I'm looking at tonight is pretty well covered in the GitHub feature roadmap, and we've got that link there. So that's our main resource to look at tonight. So the first thing I'm going to look at is shapes. So up until now, we've basically only had rectangles. That's the box view in Xamarin Forms. We've had a few things with corner radius, although they weren't very widely available. Now we're going to have ellipse, so that gets you circles and ovals, rectangles, polygons, lines, and polylines. And over here, I've got some samples of kind of what we can do with that. Sorry, not those ones. Spoiler alert. I'm just going to have to kill that app and start it again because I don't know how to get back from that page I was in. So this app that I'm demoing now is part of the Xamarin Forms repo. Highly recommend you go have a dig around in there. You can just spend hours looking at how all sorts of things are done, but the control gallery is really cool. That shows you kind of how every little thing can be used. So this is the shapes gallery. Because shapes is under an experimental flag, we just need to run that enable shapes. And ellipse gallery is their first example. So there's kind of how you can draw an oval. Interestingly, we've got the dashed border. So up until now, that was kind of probably a nightmare to implement. And if your designer told you to do it, you'd probably just say no. But we've got like a lot more control over dash borders, fill colors, border colors, radiuses, stuff like that. We've also got some rectangles, pretty much the same things, with some corner radiuses on there as well, and a bit more control over them than what we had with the box view. And pretty much all of these come in, if you just want to put the picture on the screen, you just say, give me an ellipse in XAML and fill out all the properties. Same again for the rectangle. But then we can also kind of combine them with some other controls by clipping. So here, that's a date picker. We've got a grid there. We've got a search bar, time picker, entries and editors. We can put a clip path on top of any Xamarin Forms view and change its shape. So here we've kind of just got several examples of doing the same kind of things, but it really opens up your opportunities for what your Xamarin Forms controls can look like without having to go down and do renderers and fight APIs. This just brings it right to you. If you want a star-shaped entry field, you can have it. So that's kind of the basics of what we can do with shapes. The next step to that is a path. So a path is a shape, but it lets you, instead of just kind of going off squares and rectangles, draw any old shape you like by telling it what lines. So you can go for so this line draws this path draws a line from those two coordinates. And once again, you can also use that to clip the view. So you can do arc, segment, Bezier, line, polyline, polyquadratic. Kim says that data looks like an SVG path, wondering if it's the same format. I'm not sure if it's exactly the same format as an SVG. It is the same syntax that they use in WPF. So for people with a Windows desktop development background, a lot of these features coming in 4.7 are heavily influenced by how it was done there. But yeah, not sure if it is exactly the same. Given how similar it looks to SVGs, you may well be right. It may well be the same syntax. I don't know off the top of my head though. But it's a very similar concept. Back in the simulator, our paths. So here they've used a path with a clip mask with a red square, they've cut out that line segment and a heart shape around it. And you can see that as you kind of scale it, position it differently, it all fits quite nicely. So that's one of the really cool things about using paths instead of doing this sort of thing with an image. Instead of putting in that image at 3 different scale factors in iOS and 5 different scale factors in Android and taking up several hundred kilobytes in your app, you've now just got maybe 100 character string. So you can save hugely on your app and also make it customizable and have colors swap in and out and handle that sort of stuff programmatically. Is there one more? No, I didn't have it. There isn't another path one in there. So paths are very cool. If you've done much stuff with Skia, or kind of in a lot of other UI frameworks, they've had this concept for a long time. So it's really cool to get it in to Xamarin Forms without having to look elsewhere. So they're kind of the two big features that are ready to go. You can get that in the Xamarin Forms 4.7 pre-release Nougat, and I think that'll be coming out any day now. This is just it's not kind of a big flashy headline feature with a UI to show off, but multi-binding is something pretty cool, and I've kind of fudged my way around this one a few times too. Now, if you want, so we've been able to do binding in Xamarin Forms for ages, where if you want to check its visibility or is enabled to a property in your view model, you just say is visible equals binding some view model property. Now we can connect it to two of them at once. So this example is for the button to issue a driver's license. It checks, is the person over 16? Have they passed their exam? And do they not have a criminal record? So this kind of can be very useful for validation, and also to kind of clean up your view models so you don't have those kind of aggregated getters. This is done using value converters, but now you can have multiple values coming into there. So I think this one will be pretty cool to clean up your code, but it's not quite as exciting as the other things I've been playing with lately. Any questions on any of this as we go? Feel free to butt in.
And we're pretty quiet on the chat board there.
Yeah, but do go ahead if anything comes up. Next thing I'm going to look at is gradients. This is meant to be 4.7, although from looking at what's going on in GitHub, I'm suspicious it might be being pushed back to 4.8. But you can pull down the code and have a play with it now if you are feeling brave. So this is another one that used to be quite a pain. You either had to put Skia in or you had to write it twice, and every time it was going to be on another one of your controls, whether that was a button or whether it was going to be the background of the whole page, it'd be a whole palaver of the designer asks for something and you're like, oh yeah, I can probably do that. Now we've got some nice clean syntax and you can put this on any Xamarin Forms control. So my example here, we've got a grid and then you just say grid.background, and in there you can put any of these new brush controls. So linear gradient, radial gradient, or solid color is the other one. We can bring this up in our gallery app here as well. If I just search for brush gallery. That's another experimental feature that'll need a flag until we get to Xamarin Forms 5. Oh, Pancake View. Kim Foltz has pointed out the other option was to use Pancake View. Pancake View will still have many uses. It's an awesome Nougat that kind of adds all the stuff to views in Xamarin Forms that in terms of graphics that aren't quite there. So gradients, borders, frames, that sort of stuff. Does a really cool job of that. Made by Stephen Taverson. So this first one, the gradient views, has a sample of kind of all these different things just with a plain red background. And then we can say, instead of having a background on it, let's go for a vertical linear gradient. We can put that on our checkbox, on a frame, on an image. Oh, that one got missed somehow, but basically use it anywhere. So this one hasn't been merged into Xamarin Forms master branch yet, but we're getting very close. So that's basically what we're getting in 4.7. The focus there is all around basically 2D graphics, bringing in a lot of that stuff that the WPF developers have been asking for a long time. Oh, well, actually, I skipped one thing. One other cool or maybe interesting thing about the gradients, they've got CSS support. So if you've got a gradient in the website that goes with your app and you've already got the CSS gradient, which may well be how it comes from your designer, you can put it in CSS syntax and it'll show up just like that. Next thing we're going to look at is the app bar. So app bar serves a very similar role to the nav bar that we've had built into Xamarin Forms probably pretty much since the start. The main difference is that so a navigation bar is this bit up the top. We've got a back arrow and a back button and a title in the middle. That's been there for a long time, but it's very much locked down to what iOS will let you do, what Android will let you do, and kind of a small subset of what the two agree on you should be allowed to do. Now it's going to be implemented inside Xamarin Forms. So the old one isn't going away. We're getting the new option of an app bar, and it's just a Xamarin Forms control, which means you can put any Xamarin Forms content you like in there. And you can also put it anywhere throughout your app, and you also get access to all the events. And I've lost the simulator that I want. Here it is. So the resources for this are on GitHub as well. This one isn't merged in yet. This is in its separate repo made by Javier Suarez. He's one of the Xamarin Forms devs. So for the app bar, this one basically just shows you same things you could have done in the nav bar. But then we get to looking at events. So when I click back, we now get exposed to that, whereas in Xamarin Forms, that used to be hidden away. So we can now control what happens there because it's all within the Forms area where we can do whatever we like. We can also add and remove the icons. We've got a lot more control over them than we used to have. If we go change icon. So yeah, those are things that was probably already manageable, but it was a lot more code because a toolbar item was kind of very locked down in what it could do. Different heights. This is one that I've had a few designers ask. I was like, oh, if you really want, I can write some renderers, but can we just leave it the same? Now that's just very easy. You just give it a height request like you would with anything else. Question from Kim Philpotts. So I'm guessing the new app bar is not using the native nav bars directly, rather a Xamarin Forms implementation of a nav bar. Exactly. It's just a Xamarin Forms control that you can put anywhere you like. And actually, if we look at the code to make it, it's not actually all that much code. So there's just an app bar C# file. It's got the options to put in your views, the colors you're most likely to want to use, height requests, a few events, stuff like that. But this is all just in one .NET Standard project. So it doesn't have any iOS or Android or anything else specific implementations at all. It is just purely Xamarin Forms, which is an interesting approach and a kind of a new direction for how things are happening in Xamarin Forms. We kind of saw visual and material were kind of the start of this new approach of making things consistent across platforms instead of purely how they are on each platforms. And it's also making things much more reusable, which came with the swipe view that you just looked at. So with the list view, the swipe was built in and it could only be used there. And even though that code had been written, if you wanted to put that anywhere else in your app, too bad, write it again. And same with the kind of refresh view that was built into list view, but we couldn't put it anywhere else. Now it is its own separate component. So they're making things more consistent across platforms and also easier to put anywhere in your app that you like. There's also a cool one we've got here with scrolling. So you start off with the scroll behavior out full. When you scroll down, it kind of shrinks up. This one probably doesn't work too well on a screen with a notch, but it shows something very cool that previously, if you were going to do something like that, you'd need to handle that all just in the view of your page, and then it doesn't really fit in with the navigation. This is kind of putting the control to have any Xamarin Forms content you want, but still kind of the features of having the navigation and the behaviors set for you. So given that this really is just all Xamarin Forms code with nothing platform specific, there's nothing stopping you from having written this code yourself in your Xamarin Forms project. It's just that now Javier's put it together in a nice way and we'll get it merged in officially. And this last one, I was shocked when I saw it that this was even possible. Here we've got an animated GIF as a background. So animated GIF's another one of those features that's not very old. I think it came out in 4.3, 4.4, something like that. With surprisingly not that much hype around it, because that's something that everyone had been asking for years, and a lot of people had kind of done themselves in different ways, but now animated GIFs just work and they work great. And you can put it in your app bar and it looks beautiful. Next one we look at is the tab view. This is almost exactly the same as the app bar, which meant that I could reuse most of the words on here. The only real difference is that it's used for tabs instead of the kind of title and navigation stuff. So in one of my simulators, here we go, this one. You can do, so this is basically just showing what you would be able to do with tabs anyway. You can have text only, that's fine. Custom tabs, so you start to be able to put your own stuff in there. Oh, that one's fairly boring actually. Cyclical tabs, this is kind of cool. Once you swipe past your fourth tab, it'll go, oh, I thought it went back to the first tab. I swear it did before. Oh, there we go. There's a checkbox down there, is cyclical. There we go. After 4, you go back to 1. Also, I've got some Xamarin Forms content down here underneath the tab bar. That used to be impossible. With this new tab bar, you can just have it down there. You can also have one at the top, one at the bottom. You can even put a tab bar in the middle of your screen if you really like. Although David now made it very clear that I was not allowed to do that, but you can do it. Can you do 6 tabs? I haven't tried it, but we can find out. I'll go through a few more samples and then we'll try that. But I reckon you probably can. So lazy tabs gives you a bit of control over when it's loaded. So here we kind of got a status view saying when this spun up, the first one initialized, the other 3 waited until they were prepared to do the initialization. So that'll give you faster startup times. You'll have a lot more control over that sort of stuff. The fab tab, oh, I've actually butchered this one. The point of this was meant to be that this circle button can pop up higher than the tab bar. But I was messing around with some other things. You can also have a curved radius on it. And if you have it set a little differently, the content can extend behind it. So you really can put kind of anything you like in there. And once again, just to show off, here's a tab bar with animations in the background. Once again, this sample is from Javier's sample where he's implemented it. I can't take credit for it. So yeah, that's kind of what we can do with tabs. Let's do a quick check. Can I have 6 tabs? Just got to find the right Visual Studio. Here it is. So if we look at the basic tabs at gallery.xaml, so here's the syntax of how you'll use it, although this will probably change a bit before we hit kind of stable. I've just got controls, I've just got a tab view, and within there, I set an item template for what will go, like the layout of each tab. Oh no, that's a different one. Here we've just got tab item 1. I've got some content there. Tab item 2. I've got some content there. So interestingly here, these are views, not pages, but I'm sure they're going to be working out what the best way to put pages in there is. So there we've got 2, 3, 4. Let's check if hot reload's running. Cool, we've got 4, 5, 6. There you go, you got 6 tabs. 7, 8, 9. I think that's only 8. But you can scroll. There you go. If you've got 9 tabs, you're doing something wrong. I think basically, you should go into some kind of overflow layout rather than having that many.
No, you always need these for tablets, not for phones. So on a tablet, it's ridiculous that it's limited to 5.
Yeah. Or there you go, in a phone, that's kind of fits just fine. So yeah, no reason that that should only be 5 when 9 fit comfortably. The other cool thing is around having dynamic content in there. So here we've got, let's go back to portrait. I've forgotten how you do it, but there's some way that number 3 there is generated as code live, and you can kind of modify that. You can basically put any content you like. With the new media element that Kim Philpotts has, was demoing before, we could put a video in each of those tabs if we wanted. You can do absolutely anything. There it is, the tab badge. So I've got the increase and decrease. So that's going to be good for putting notifications and stuff like that. You're no longer just limited to having an icon and some text. Cool. That is, here we go, another question. And we can have tabs in the middle of the pages too, right? Yes, we can. If you really, we're no longer limited to bottom and top. We can have a tab bar right in the middle, or perhaps, like that sounds silly, but if you're kind of if you've got a bunch of content and then you're using your tabs to choose between the kind of the 2 sets of lists of content, you can use it to change that. So it's not as silly as it sounds. When I wanted to put the nav bar in the middle of the screen, maybe not so much. More like a tab strip, I'm thinking. Yes. So I did attempt to bring all of this together, and I got somewhere there, but because all the content is currently in separate repos and separate branches, didn't quite work. But here I have got an app bar, a shape, a gradient, and my tab view there. My eyes. So yes. And the way I laid out this page, even though, sure, it's got some issues, if I find the right one, yep, this Visual Studio. So I'm just in a plain old content page here with a grid. And then I've got an app bar at the top. And in there, I've got a gradient. Then I've got this tab view that is using, we've got the tab strip background view. So there I put a box view, but that's your kind of your whole background for what goes in there. You could put an image or a video or whatever there. Then I've got a bunch of items. But this tab view is just inside a grid. So after my tab view, I could then put, or on top of my tab view or anything I liked, I can put a label down there. Or if you're going to have that kind of tab strip that Kim was asking for, maybe if you've got a tab above it to change what items go in your collection view, you could put that down there. And up here in my row definitions, there's that cool new grid syntax. So now if I'm just going to add another row underneath that, if I say an auto in there, let's put some text on that label. Too many quotes. I'm pretty sure hot reload isn't going to work here. I'll give it a stop start. Any questions from Lisa? I love the new grid row column definition coming with 4.7. Yes, me too. It's something that I think a lot of people have been wanting for a long time, and it sounds like something that shouldn't have been that hard, but yeah, anyway, we've got it now, and I'm so happy because I just have spent, what have I got? I still got my column definitions written out like that. So yeah, super pumped for that. I did skip over a slide before, it seemed. Where did my other slide go? It's not a very important one. Here we go. So in the GitHub discussion, this was James's comment. Yes, 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 yes. So it's, the new syntax is James Montemagno endorsed.
So does anyone else have any questions to Lachlan directly? Otherwise, we'll open up for general questions and maybe take some people off mute. So any questions for Lachlan on this? No. So first of all, thank you, Kim and Lachlan. That was very, very informative. I personally have learned a lot from that. So I'm waiting for 4.8 now. I didn't even think it was important, but yes, it is. So I'm just going to quickly mention all of the things that these guys have touched on. So just to prompt your memory in case you've got any questions. So we covered embedded fonts, media elements, experimental features, the app theming, swipe view, and expander. And I have a question on expander. And Lachlan covered shapes, paths, multi-binding, gradients, app bar, and tab view. So does anyone have any questions, especially because I cut Kim short and didn't give him a question time back there? Any questions, anyone?
No
So
question.
maybe I'll kick it off, Kim. So when you covered the expanders, right?
Mhm.
So you showed the example of hitting the header and then the 3 dot points appeared. So can you have expanders within expanders? So first question. And so in other words, the expander, the header, click on the header and then 1 dot point, then the second, then the third.
Yes.
And second question is, can it be timed? So I hit the header and then dot point 1 appears and then a second later dot point 2 and then dot point 3. So first question, can you have expanders within expanders?
Yes, you can. Yes, you can. So you might use that for something like a file view, like a file tree.
Oh yeah, of course. Yep.
Yeah. So yes, you can. You can do that. As far as the delay of things appearing, there's an animation speed for animation expanding and contracting. So you can adjust that speed if that's what you're after. I think though, if you want to sort of step them in, you're probably going to have to write some custom animation code for that.
Right.
Because it'll just expand it out over a period of time by itself. Whereas you might want to go sort of expand. So.
Oh, I see. So custom animation to set the is expanded.
Yeah, it kind of. I suppose it depends on what you're trying to do, what effect you're trying to achieve. But look, you got a lot of control over it because you can sort of say, because the great thing about it really is that it measures out the content that's going to be inside of it, so it knows how far to expand, which is really, really useful. Right. And then you know by default it will just make those elements inside visible, but you could write custom code to step them in if you wanted to.
Cool. So anyone else got any questions for Kim on any of his topics?
No, clear as mud.
No, clear as mud. So I've got a question to Lachlan on the shapes. On your the 2D stuff that's coming in 4.7. So I know Lachlan, and everyone should know that Lachlan's quite an expert on Skia Sharp. What's your thought about this? And some of the stuff you've done on Skia Sharp is quite amazing on the speed of Skia. What's this 2D? What's it like on the speed, and how does it compare to Skia Sharp?
I think I think the role of these 2D graphics isn't really for kind of the parts where you would use Skia in a high performance context. So if you're going to be doing something where performance matters in Skia, you probably got a canvas that's an area that's kind of all in on Skia on what you do there, and you're going to be doing some animation or some graphing or games or something like that. And Skia's really good at that, and it's going to keep on having it as its focus. I think the role of these things is more the parts where we used to use Skia, but it wasn't a great fit. So you could use Skia to draw a gradient background on your page, but it was a bit of a pain to put in and an overkill in terms of syntax and bringing in a NuGet and stuff like that. Or drawing 3 lines to do a hamburger item in Skia would be lots of code, but you could do it. Whereas with this new Xamarin Forms paths, you can do it seamlessly, and you can have Xamarin Forms paths in 20 different places throughout your app without thinking about it, whereas that's kind of tricky in Skia. I think overall, these graphics are nowhere near as performant as Skia, but where you're probably going to use them, you're not going to care. Any of that high performance stuff, you're probably still going to want to go for Skia because yeah, that's kind of what it's built to do.
Cool. Now, Gary, you've got a question here. Do you want to come off mute and ask? Well, we still can't hear you, Gary.
There we go.
Yep, perfect. Cool.
Look, I use Syncfusion controls in my app, and I feel like Xamarin Forms is encroaching on that area with the expander, the tab control, and the swipe view. Swipe's not very good in Syncfusion currently, but I feel there's an encroachment there. What are your thoughts, Kim?
I think it's kind of always been that way of Xamarin Forms, or even outside of that, WPF or whatever, they'll release some fairly basic controls. And for something to make it into Xamarin or an official big package, things are going to move more slowly. Whereas Syncfusion and the third-party controls have got that motivation to get it out fast and get the dollars in.
Yeah.
I don't think it's really going to be a threat to Syncfusion. I think they'll always stay a few steps ahead. They're going to keep on bringing out more cool stuff. But I think Syncfusion must be well aware of the market that they're in, and that anything they build will be kind of replaced. So kind of, I think Syncfusion will be fine, but then there are a few other kind of smaller one-off projects that I think are more in danger, and it's a bit more worrying there. So Live XAML was an absolutely wonderful product, and a lot of us were happily paying good money to get the excellent features, and now XAML hot reloads out, and that's essentially a dead business. And that's happened with a few other things as well. So I guess it happens. Sometimes it's great for us. Sometimes it's a shame.
Yep.
Kim, your lips are moving, but we can't hear you.
Just the usual. No, I was going to say, I think all of the ones that are going into Xamarin Forms are pretty low hanging fruit. They're pretty common stuff. I think where the vendors are still going to have a lot of value is having really customizable properties and things on those elements, because, you know, I think the Xamarin Forms team would be hard pressed to support some of the more obscure things that are supported by the controls. So I think there'll still be a place. And hopefully it means as well that the control vendors can stop implementing this stuff themselves and just start using what's in there so they can build even better stuff. That would be my hope.
Another control that we've had just come out recently, or is in one of the new previews that neither of us covered for some reason, is we've got our radio buttons now. And that's, other than Xamarin Forms, I think it was in every other UI framework ever in the 0.1 release. And for some reason, we've been waiting a while. So Syncfusion had that, but now there's Xamarin Forms one's out, and the Syncfusion version of that will probably go away. But yeah, that's, as Kim said, low-hanging fruit.
But see, I mean, that one's interesting, right? Because I think the reason the radio button was never there is because it's not actually on all platforms.
Okay, I say every UI framework. I guess I meant every UI framework except iOS.
Yeah. But I guess, you know, that's some of the changes that I'm seeing or I'm perceiving without any internal knowledge at all, is that, and you mentioned it, Lachlan, that you know, they're starting to implement things which aren't just aren't just exposing native controls. So, you know, deciding that, hey, you know what, people do want stuff to look similar across multiple platforms. You mentioned it started with visual, and, you know, now we're seeing it with like radio buttons and app bars now, things like that. So, and I think it's a good thing, actually.
I think, wasn't it about 18 months ago they did a survey, and it might not have been a survey, but someone was, I think it was James and Frank talking about it. The biggest feedback and the biggest criticism from Xamarin developers is there wasn't enough controls. So if they're going to spend a lot of time doing lots of stuff, then they should spend it on the controls, because that's where forms is falling behind. So and that's what we're seeing now. So I think maybe they listened, maybe.